The war in Gaza is still a major focus at the ongoing G20 Summit in Brazil. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is urging G20 members to play a more active role in achieving a ceasefire deal on the Gaza war. Mr. Fidan attended a session on the role of G20 in ongoing international tension, where he said the brutality in Gaza should be stopped as soon as possible. He encouraged the international community and the G20 to support a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. HakanFidan expressed Turkey's hope that the involved parties will shift towards diplomacy to find a solution. Now, for more on the war between Russia and Ukraine, for more on the G20 summit, international affairs analyst Ria Fancheli joins me now from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Good to have you join us.
Hi, Precious. Thank you for having me.
So let me start with President Lula, who made really strong statements during the summit, and also the Brazil's foreign minister. They talked about reforming the United Nations to including more members in the Security Council, and then also ending the right of veto. Brazil seems to be finding its voice and establishing its presence in international politics. Do you agree with that?
I think so. The summit taking place in Rio de Janeiro now is the first meeting of foreign ministers of the G20, the group with the 20 largest economies on the planet. It aims to discuss points on the agenda and coordinate work for the G20 summit that will take place in the end of the year, November, December, maybe. It should focus mainly on social issues such as sustainable development, combating hunger and poverty, and reforming the international institutions, which have been raised by President Lula for some time now. Although the world is currently focused on major conflicts, the war between Israel and Hamas, Russia and Ukraine, military coups taking place in Africa, it is very important that a reform of these international institutions is actually discussed, because they reflect the way that we see these institutions today. They reflect the world as it was when they were created 70, 80 years ago. So economies have changed, countries have changed, and the balance of power has also changed. Today, developing countries and poorer countries do not feel represented by these institutions due to successive events. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, for example, they were the poor countries were the last ones to get a vaccine. When there's a refugee crisis emerging in Africa or in Asia, how are these people received in Europe? With prejudice, unlike the Ukrainians who initially were welcomed with open doors. So this treatment that most countries in the world, which are poorer countries, have received has generated dissatisfaction with the international system now. And according to Brazil, it's something that President Lula has defended for some time now. It needs to be reviewed, and that's the main discussions in the meetings that started yesterday and should end today in 2 hours from now.
And the assessment of the United Nations, first of all, there's been a call for the reform of the institution, but the foreign minister, Brazil's foreign minister, did say that the institution has been unable to prevent global conflict. Is that the responsibility of the institution to prevent global conflict? And would that be a fair assessment of the institution?
It's true, and it's also very sad that the Brazilian foreign minister is right, because the United Nations, it was created to replace the League of Nations because it failed to prevent another conflict. What we see the UN doing today is playing the part of a major NGO and not preventing conflict, because it has become the stage for a wrestling fight between the world's largest superpowers. So we always have, for example, the largest liberal democracies, France, the United Kingdom, and the United States in one side, and Russia and China on the other side in the Security Council. So it has failed very, very gravely, and it is not preventing major conflicts.
And we've seen that, in terms of the Israel-Hamas war, the use of veto. On one hand, sometimes it's China, it is Russia, and it's the US. Just recently, where there was a move, or a resolution by Algeria, the United Nations Security Council, to call for a ceasefire, and the U.S. used its veto to end, to ensure that that resolution doesn't pass. And now Brazil is also calling for an end to veto rights. How do you think that that's going to play out, especially when you look at China, Russia, and the U.S.? Will they agree to such reforms?
I don't think that should happen so easily, because there are so many variables in this story. When we talk about reforming the Security Council and adding new members, different countries have different interests. So if you talk about adding Brazil to as a permanent member in the Security Council with veto power, there are other countries, other developing countries, that also want to play this role, and they wouldn't like Brazil to join, as for example, Mexico in Latin America. When you talk about, for example, adding another African country, or at least one African country, which country should we add? Because there will be competition among these countries. And something more pragmatic, and I mean a more pragmatic argument I would add, is that even if the decisions of the Security Council, sometimes they're not even respected among themselves, and we're talking about countries that are nuclear superpowers. So what would actually change if you add countries that are not even nuclear superpowers? I mean, we see today that countries are just doing whatever they want to do, unfortunately.
And the meeting this week is in preparation for the summit in November. We'll see how world leaders continue to react to some of these issues that have been raised. Always a pleasure to have you on, Uriah Fancheli, International Affairs Analyst.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.